Welcome to Slow Love Unravelled with Holly
and Isabel.
This week we thought it would be great to go through and give you guys a sort of list of top 10 points for starting a brand. And we thought long and hard about what we still talk about now, and we are 3 years in. That's really important to us as we are obviously still growing. But we wanted to sort of go through the basics from the very beginning, and hopefully there'll be something that you all find really helpful with this. And Isabel just pointed out to me, we are a fashion e-commerce brand. So this should apply to any sort of brand, but we are obviously tailoring it specifically to our business model, which is
but a lot of it is really, really transferable.
Yeah, transferable. That was the word I was looking for. So the first point of this, I mean, also something to point out is that we don't have any experience. We had no experience in this area, either of us. Mm-hmm. So I obviously founded Slow Love Knitwear, but I didn't have any experience in working, from a brand startup point of view. Really no e-commerce experience whatsoever. I'd started Pre-Loved Edit, but that was really all self-taught. And Isabel has basically worked every single place you can ever imagine.
I haven't been a fireman.
No.
Or a binman.
So there's kind of just common sense, really, more than anything, that's pulled it together, and transparency with each other as far as the communication within the brand and making sure we're on track. But hopefully you'll find these top 10 tips very useful if you are thinking about starting a brand, or you've started a brand and you're maybe feeling like it's not taking off. I get asked a lot by people who are maybe struggling with kind of getting their brand off the ground, as what did I do? What step did I make that made the brand go sort of skyrocket in the way it did in the first year? And I think people quite often want to hear almost like a cheat hack. Like, say, when people say, oh, how did you lose all that weight, for example, people want you to tell them a magic answer, and there isn't actually a magic answer, which I think is really important. It's just been consistency and trusting my guts more than anything. But we are going to delve into all of this in these top 10 points. So do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I think number one, and Holly has spoken about this so much before, is knowing the audience of what you're selling, who's buying your products. And I think you, with Pre-Loved Edit, starting that, you really nailed that really early on, which I think is, such a great framework for like how you then develop your product.
Yeah, I think framework's such a good word.
It is a good word.
But knowing, I feel like we just know our customer. I can close my eyes. So, for example, when we're sort of looking at new designs, and we've talked about this recently, where we've now met some of our regular customers, in my head, I'm sort of like, okay, would so-and-so buy this? Because they are our customer. We have quite a vast age range, but I feel like our customer thinks a certain way. They fit within a sort of law of diffusion hump, and they're looking for the same thing, and they definitely appreciate the detail and like the craftsmanship. I don't love the word craftsmanship because it makes it sound sort of crafty, but I guess the technical detail that goes into knitwear, which I really don't know that much about. I can appreciate it and I know what to look for. Grace is the one who is the best person to speak to about that, but I feel like our customer who buys from us again and again really appreciates
the
that.
detail. Yeah,
100%. And they understand that what they really see the value in what they're paying for. Where that message at the moment gets so lost, I feel like they really get that.
And I think it's really easy for us now to say, oh, Holly did Pre-Loved Edit, which allowed her to find out who her customer was. Ultimately, what that was is just delving deeper into a gap which you think is there, and discovering if that gap is actually there. And if you were going to fill that gap, who is going to buy what you've created to fill that gap?
Yeah.
That is knowing your audience, and it's being really honest about that and going, okay, if I was this person, or I am that person, which you actually kind of were your own customer at that point, weren't you? As in, I love vintage knitwear, I love the way it's made, I love that it's pure yarn, I want to buy it, and this is how much I would pay for it. I'm just a real woman. I have children. I want to wear something every day. I'm working in an environment where I don't have to be in a suit and a tie, or times are changing. I want to be able to create something. So it's just constantly asking that question of why, and honestly answering yes or no. And you know, if you start kind of kidding yourself from the beginning, you're gonna get yourself off on the wrong foot. So it's just that market research and the delving in to finding that gap, and then filling that gap with the right audience. Yeah,
definitely. I think, and also just like where our customer, there's sort of a familiarity with a lot of our shapes, and we know that our customer appreciates that and loves it. But I also feel like our customer now trusts us enough to maybe delve out into something that's slightly different. But again, thinking about our customer is what will sort of slightly dictate how we would produce a shape. So whereas I might want to wear something that's sleeveless, for example, or you know, something that would be above the knee. I'm just trying to think off the top of my head, but we definitely have to say to ourselves, you know, would this person that we know buys from us regularly want that? And be honest about the fact that, you know, would they buy that? Which sometimes kind of goes against if it's not, maybe if your person, if deep down you're like, but I love it. You have to kind of find a good
middle ground.
Or
like tweaking stuff. I always go back to I think the first thing, one of the first really new products that we created after the Feel Good was the Charlie jumper.
Yeah.
And I remember the first sample that came and you tried it on, and it looked amazing, and it hung really beautifully. And then I put it on, and it hung the same on me as it did you everywhere else, apart from it went ever so slightly in at the bottom, and it clung to my bottom.
Yeah.
And actually, lots of our customers have a bottom like mine, and you know, so we had to go, let's pull that out a little bit, or make sure that shape is then suitable for everybody, which still looked great on a size 8 or straight up and down, as it would on somebody with a little bit more bottom heavy or curvy.
It's really true. And thinking about all the different shapes and sizes, I mean, this is particularly, we are referring to fashion, but if you're I don't know, wanting to start up a takeaway soup company, and you want it to be somewhere which is, you look at a location and you think, oh, I'll have it in a car park and as a drive-through, you know, realistically your customer's probably not going to be the sort of person that's going to drive through and get a cup of takeaway soup and drive with it. That's a really silly example, but you know what I'm trying to say. It's, you would want to have, you know, somewhere that's maybe a busy, bustling street that lots of mums with their prams and busy lives might want to just come and get something to go, which is convenient. And it's not starting a business where you think, well, I like this, and it's like a hobby of mine and I enjoy it, without thinking, is there actually a gap in the market for it? So yeah, I think just being honest with yourself, but really knowing you need to be able to just close your eyes and completely picture your customer.
Yeah. And
try and engage, but also to keep yourself different. I do think try new things, but the majority of the time you need to definitely be serving your customer.
Yeah, finding a gap and making sure it's different enough from either an actual gap or something different from what already exists.
Yeah, 100%.
Should we move on to the next one?
Let's do it.
Okay, what's number 2?
Number 2 is branding. So this is a really tricky one, because I think where somebody might see a gap in the market, they might not necessarily be a creative. I think if you can see a good business model, you don't always know sort of the vision for how you want it. Like, for example, there's no way I could have ever drawn the Slow Love logo, but I did use a graphic designer called Emily, who I knew from just working with her in the past was totally understood my wavelength.
I was going to say, you might not have been able to do the creative aspect of it, but you knew you had your brief, didn't you?
Yeah.
And being able to go to a creative with that clear brief, so they can kind of create that visual branding for you. And I think when I wasn't actually here at the time you were doing any of that, so I kind of
I had to make the decision on my own. But actually, this is a really good example of going with your gut. So the branding, Emily, we discussed it at length. I was very clear that I wanted Slow Love to be this insanely high level quality product. Hand knits were the first thing, but I didn't want it to have a like crafty feel. I wanted it to have this luxury street style premium side to it. So Slow Love, when she did the logo, she did loads of different variations of the logo. Some were just wildly different to what it is, and I remember seeing the logo and just being like, that's it. There is no going away from it. That is the only one I want. Even if like 100 people and people who are closest to me had said, no, I don't think you should go with that one, it would have been like, I don't care.
Yeah,
I'm going, that is the one. There is no bending with that. There is no room for anyone else's opinion. I know for a fact that is the logo. So that was, I don't think it happens all the time that way, but I remember just thinking there's no two ways about it. That is the look and feel I want people to have when they see a jumper and then see our brand name. So that was quite clear for me. And I guess just starting off, so the branding I started off with, it just, you kind of have that I had that as a starting block, and it was the foundation to then working on the website. So I didn't pay anybody to do my website. It was really clunky. We just built on it as we went, and we now have a completely new website that I don't really understand how it works at all, because Abby did it, and we've had lots of coding and bits done on top of it, but it did the job. And I just needed somebody to find our website, get the product and click to buy. And then actually I taught myself how to read the analytics and the stats, but the branding side, I kind of knew the look and feel. I found a photographer, I think, on Instagram was the first photographer I worked with.
To take initial images.
I sent them off to her, the jumpers, and I'm looking at one of her photos right now, the blue Feel Good.
Oh
yeah.
my God, yeah, I forgot what that was.
Yeah, she was the first photographer I worked with. And we had a good chat on the phone for about an hour, similar as the way I did with Emily with the logo. And I sent the jumpers to her. She took them away, found the models, sent me the shots, and I was very clear about the aesthetic I wanted for those first shots. And then it was just me doing the content, which was so orcs because I wasn't natural, but I didn't have anybody to pay to do it initially. So it was like, I wanted to just constantly talk about how incredible these jumpers were.
I think you've kind of spoken there a bit about our third top tip, which is not striving for that instant perfection.
Yeah.
I remember when I first started, I brought a jumper from the website, so kind of from a customer perspective, I could tell you that worked for me, but it was very clear that Holly had such a clear avenue in her mind about what Slow Love was, what it looked like, but the website was so basic. It wasn't perfect. The pictures didn't, there was lifestyle images, flat lay images, some taken on a phone. It wasn't a beautiful, cohesive.
It wasn't a user-friendly experience.
It kind of was user-friendly.
It was simple. It did the job.
It did the job, but it wasn't this like perfect. It was very just like
bish bosh bash.
Yeah, but because the branding and the product and that constant kind of showing up for showing the product was so clear, that bit didn't matter. People at that time didn't necessarily care about that Slow Love website wasn't super glossy because you were so sure about what everything was so just if you don't try and make everything perfect before you get it out there to your customer. You know your customer wants to buy this because you've already done those 2 first steps. Just get it out there and just tweak along the way. And as you get even little things like, as you get, the tote bags didn't that came so much later, because all of that refinement kind of grows with you, even as kind of as crude as it is, when you've got the money to spend on refining these things. In the beginning you kind of just got to start selling, and then you can perfect it along the way. So
as long as you're I think you just, for me it was spending the time on customer service, the branding. So I paid Emily, who is a very well experienced proper graphic designer. She was a good sort of initial outlay cost, and I knew, but that was a foundation block that I was like, I'm getting this right for the first time. I'm not going to do it in a sort of half, get my brother's friend to sort of get. I was like, this has to be done properly from the get-go, so that there is no wavering from that. So that was the beginning of the branding journey. And I also had I don't know if it was like a care card, I can't even really remember. I think it had maybe the return instructions on it or something that I sent out, and then the bags were hand stamped, which we still do today. So it shows actually that I knew what the customers would want, and it was sticking to that.
We use the word, which is a bit cliche, it's a bit jargony, but we use the word integrity a lot. But actually, you're better off your integrity being really strong in those early days than everything being really glossy. I think if people could tell that Slow Love was a really true, honest brand, I do think it helps that you were the face of it, because you were like everything at that, when it was just literally you on your own, you were everything. You were the face, you were like saying the message, you were explaining where you found this gap. So I think if you can show that integrity, I think your customer starts trusting you from really early on.
Gaining people's trust is such an important thing. And also, as a founder, no one is going to like big up their products more than the founder. Like I don't know much about anything, but I would argue with somebody until the end of the earth as to why this is one of the best jumpers out there. And that's how I've always felt. So, and then, I mean, we're going to go on to sort of hiring for a team in a minute, but that was always something that was so important to me, was that the people who worked here had to have that like loyalty to the brand and see and know that there was no wavering, that we are the best at what we do. And I think that is something that we have as a team, and people really get that through our social media. And it's that isn't something fake, which is going on to our next point. That is the integrity, and it is honest, because that's how we feel. So, and everybody wears it, everybody wears the brand. Even, people that come in and work freelance for a day a week, Ben is now, Slow Love fan, and that's what everybody reaches for, because it is the best.
So just quick recap then. So number 1, know your audience. Number 2, branding. Number 3, don't strive for instant perfection. And number 4 is when you kind of move on from being on your own to building your team and hiring, kind of knowing what you want from your team in those early days. But I think, so your first hire was Abby.
Abby was
Producer Abby.
Abby's been with me from the very beginning. So even when the first week I moved into the office was when somebody recommended Abby to me, and I got in contact. And she was such a big investment for me, but that was so important. And it was like, I think if somebody spoke to me and asked me what I was doing for work, and I would say I've started this knitwear brand, I was really shy about it and quite private. But then when Abby came in, I was like, we're going to be the best knitwear brand in the world, and you are coming on as this huge investment for me, but what you are going to do is keep the social platforms growing with the consistency. And if I'm paying you this much when I really can't afford to, it's going to keep me on the straight and narrow as to sort of the consistency of wanting to grow our platform, which is exactly what we've done. And we always talk about those targets and, you know, the honesty behind the camera and sort of things that work, things that don't work, and that's just how it's worked. And it was just Abby and I for quite a long time. How long is it until you started?
So I started in the kind of loosely in the October of that year.
So how long have we been? I'm trying to think. Was it a whole year? Yeah.
Wow, that is so wild.
I started in the June before, like the year before that.
Isn't that mental?
That is so wild.
But I didn't really, and I knew that I was struggling with holding all of these spinning plates, like customer service and knowing what to do about accounting, because I had no idea, and everything else that kind of in between. And I think I asked somebody, you know, when did you know to hire your first team member? And she was like, when you can afford to. And it was like, well, but I don't know if I can afford to yet. But that's a good tip for me, is apart from the, you know, hiring the right personalities, is everybody I've hired has started off freelance, which, yes, freelancers do traditionally charge more per day or per hour. But there is, you know, you're not taking on that risk with putting somebody on payroll straight away. And it's, although Isabel is now employed by the company, it's a good way to sort of test the waters and know, you know,
making sure that person is the right fit, but also that their skills are the right fit. And I think in the beginning, there is a balance of personality and skill. Yeah. But yeah, hiring for that I think hiring for a small startup has got really to be one risky. Of the hardest kind of hire scenarios there are, where you don't have that kind of big corporate framework. You've got, you know, it is literally just, it is a bit of a shot in the dark, isn't it? And you do have, your budgets are so tight at that point, and you have to get someone that really does just fit in and like hit the ground running with like what you've created thus far,
and feel like you can just get on with that person and know that it's just any podcast that you listen to about entrepreneurship and starting a brand it's like everybody has to just jump in, and there can't be sort of stick in the muds or people that are jobs worthy. And there might be some people that say, well, you know, that's what you say if you're probably overworking your staff, or they're having to do a million jobs. And it's like, it's just hard work.
It is hard work, but it's like, it's good hard work. It's not, but it's, I think you have to be prepared to just bend in the wind, and something can change on a pinhead. And when your early team members have to be okay with that change. And like, and again, this kind of, the reason why we've done it in this order is because you've got those such solid foundations. That change doesn't feel scary, as it's not a change as it's like, oh, okay, we're actually going to completely change our entire business model. It's like, God, I really thought that would come next, but actually people are asking for this, so we need to like change direction in design, or we're doing this now, and that, it's not scary, but you need your team to be like, it is scary.
I remember after your first maybe couple of weeks, and you had to sort of unpick the spider web of mess that I'd done as my accounting, because we have different payment methods and there's different things coming in and out of the website. It is quite a sort of tangled mess that you had to, for accounting purposes, had to sort of untangle. And I remember you being like, I honestly don't know if I'm going to manage to do all of this on my own and cope with it. So do you remember? And then we sort of chatted to our accountant, and he basically offered to do some training with you, which, you being you were like, bring it on. So you turned up there looking like a little ledge to their big accounting offices. And you spent the day with him, and he taught you and trained you how to use certain things. And it wasn't long until we now have a bookkeeper that works with the accountant who you coordinate with, which has released you from doing the sort of smaller bits like that and pairing, where you now focus your energy on like logistics and things that really are helping us to grow. So I mean, that's the way that your job. But I remember you being like, "Whoa," and me being like, "I don't know how to do it."
Problem solving. That's another thing I think your early team members need to be able to do is run with a problem, like go with the problem, and rather than run away from it. And I think actually everybody in the team now, in their lanes, you can be like, "This is a massive problem," and nobody's going to be like sloping shoulders, like I can't do it. It's like, yeah, let's get our hands dirty and like sort out the problem.
Yeah, and also just there's maybe sometimes knowing how much time to spend on a problem. We've had this quite a lot recently. There's a lot of new legislations and things that are thrown up at us, which is throws any small business into sort of a bit of a curveball. But there's definitely an element where you can kind of get swept up in the sort of hysterics, and it's like, well, actually, what do we need to do? And there's a lot. It is quite scary. I think just as long as everybody is doing the very best that they can.
Yeah.
But as far as with teams, I think doing all of those things and working for a new startup brand, you have to be so adaptable. But also, if it is your brand and you are starting something and you are looking to hire, one really big piece of advice I would give is a probation period. If you're taking someone on, I would say 6 months is quite a golden time to tell how somebody works and fits in well with a team or fits in with your brand. And I think if you can feel that there are red flags early on, don't ignore them.
Yeah, approach them head on.
Because as you're growing, if it doesn't fit and you need to replace them, as brutal as that sounds, it's just going to hold your brand back. You need to carry on moving forwards. So it's really important to trust your gut. But yeah, it's not all fun, that part of it. So should we move on to number 5?
Let's move on to point 5.
Oh, so this is quite a good one. I had quite bad imposter syndrome when I first started. I think there's a lot of, especially female founders, you probably feel out of your depth, maybe. I'm generalising, but I definitely had a sort of let's fake it till you make it attitude with how we are promoting ourselves or kind of bigging ourselves up. I mean, we were so lucky in that we had a lot of support from day one. So our knitwear was being promoted by people all over the world, and that definitely wasn't fake. That was amazing. But as far as sort of where I situated ourselves, I was like, we're as good as those big boys. Let's go for it. Let's do a photo shoot in Palm Springs when really I probably couldn't have afforded to. But it worked so well.
But actually, if you take this back to the beginning, think about the first influencer that you went for.
I didn't go for a small one.
Didn't go small fry. She went for the queen herself.
Yeah, I did go for somebody that was a biggie.
She was a biggie.
But I felt like she really represented what the brand was, as in her style and the way that she kind of looks at style and her style herself. And she still wears that jumper to this day without it being a hashtag ad. So I know she loved it so much. And that in itself, again, was quite an investment for me at the time. But it's worked really well.
But kind of that fake it till you make it, that message is there. You knew your product so well. You aimed high right from the get-go because you knew that's where you wanted to kind of start as you meant to go on. And actually, this isn't us being like, we completely bullshit our customers. It's not. It's placing yourself constantly ahead of where you possibly are right in that moment, from like a just striving, pushing forward,
and it doesn't that doesn't always mean a huge expense.
No.
We've never done a proper commercial, big, flashy photo shoot. We've never hired a studio.
Have we?
No, we haven't.
No.
We've hired professional photographers, and you definitely are getting what you pay for with that, 100%. But there's little things we've done like that. Really, we've hired some models. but all of that, it's kind of like we have definitely cut corners as far as the marketing side and content. We do a lot of it ourselves because it's quicker, we have full control of it.
It's more organic sometimes.
It's more organic, it's definitely authentic, and it feels like it fits in with our brand. So, but then as far as the locations, it's really fun. It's a really bonding experience for all of us. And we genuinely can show the clothes in the way that we see them. It's like putting your vision into reality, but we then get to experience it for the first time together. And I think it's a really lovely way of doing it, and it's worked well. So now it's like, yeah, let's go to New York.
God, that was so fun.
That's so good.
But that kind of fake it till you make it, it, as I said, it's not to be mistaken for. We're never lying to our customer base or anything like that. It's more that we're just constantly putting ourselves in a situation that is pushing us forward. And it's very easy to say, oh God, that's not quite right yet, but it's that kind of like, oh, that's where we want to be, so let's put ourselves there, take the risk, push it there. But then we also talk about being transparent, and which is where the honesty side of all of that comes from. And but being transparent to the point where your customer is ultimately still getting a really positive experience. They're buying from a brand that has a message that makes them want to be seen in that brand, and it's not, it's a happy, positive experience.
I really remember the second big drop of the feel goods, and talking about it. I had come home from work, and it was, I was dropping it. I was meeting my husband and my kids for dinner, and I wasn't live vlogging the whole thing, but I definitely was sort of on the stories the whole time. And the amount of people that were then messaging me to say, oh, I managed to get one, and responding to that. And that genuine excitement it's all very real. And that was not fake, that was real life for me. And it was, there was definitely a good 18 months where every single time I went out with my family, I was on my phone. But they're old enough to understand that I was building something special, and it would be worth it. And I just think talking to people about the knitwear, spring, summer for us, it's going to be really special, and I know that everybody's going to love it. It's a really exciting thing, and I love the fact that people get as excited as us when we talk about it. So I think that's sort of having to big ourselves. It's like standing in front of the mirror and basically saying to yourself, this is going to be amazing. I feel like it's kind of a weird way of doing that. That's what I've been trying to do. Yeah. The Palm Springs was so full on. And I remember saying to my brother and sister who came with me, we have to get like these key shots. I don't care what happens in between. These shots are the ones we're here for. And I've travelled so far. And we got them, and it's just felt amazing. And it really did it was like, wow, this looks so fucking cool. And it's giving this jumper everything it deserves, because this jumper is fucking cool. We want it to hit festival season in just the right way, and those shots, it was worth it. But I remember telling you, because we really couldn't afford to go to Palm Springs, so well. And I was like, by the way, I need to tell you, I've just booked to go to Palm Springs in 2 weeks' time to photograph the spaced out jumper and the new staples. I really know that we probably can't afford to do that right now, but I really want to make an impact. To push it there. I really need to do it now before Coachella. And it was like, okay. Yeah, and it was the perfect, I think, fake it till you make it isn't just like closing your eyes and being like you said, just splashing loads of money. Fake it till you make it is hard work, because it's that constant, like, being your biggest cheerleader to yourself and showing your audience, like, it is going to be big, it is going to be amazing, and really believing that, and just always pushing that. Yeah. But you need to keep that transparency and honesty in your head the whole time. Yeah. And I think that was the thing, is I knew that spaced out jumper would sell well. I knew it. So I was like, even though we're forking out this, this is, you know, it's going to do so well and people are just going to love it. Festival season, it's going to be another hero knit for us. And yeah, it was worth it, but it was a big move.
It was a big move. Right, what's next? So number 5 was
this is appropriate. Know your finances.
Yes, yeah. So I think when I first started, the Holly...
Don't hold back.
When I first started, it wasn't... Holly knew where she was from a financial perspective, from like the key points. So she had very much done her homework on how much she could sell her product for, why it was worth that price points.
And part of that was really to do with the branding and the marketing. It was like, this is where I see it sitting within this like price point, market level. I see it in Liberties one day next to this and this brand, and it was looking at the worth of it for the price more than anything. I mean, really, I'll be honest, and it wasn't coming from a sensible place. It was like, this is where I see it, this is what it's worth, that's what we're going to do. But then you came along and were like, oh no.
But what you had nailed down from the beginning, which I think is a really important tip, is knowing your margins. So it doesn't have to be an exact science. You don't have to don't get bogged down with it. I think talking to an accountant about that is really important. But doing the really obvious maths, get your buy price and your sell price and everything in between kind of nailed before you start, because it can get really ugly if you go too far and your margins aren't enough. That can really hinder you.
Yeah.
It can really, really limit you.
And if you ever,
so that's an important thing.
We're D2C, so direct to consumer. I think it's consumer or customer or both. But if you want to then start to consider wholesale, which we've dabbled with a little bit, it's very limiting if you don't know how to kind of make sure that you have the right margins for your brand. And
at that point, if you can't do it by yourself and you're worried that you're not incorporating everything you need to incorporate in those margins, speak to your accountant. Speak to other like-minded brands. A lot of founders.
This one rings our accountant literally for any reason, and he just must be.
He loves me
when he sees the phone ringing. But you're right. So much better to get the right advice before you make that product live and you put that price down or whatever, or you decide you want to maybe go with an agency that does X, Y, and Z for you. You don't know how something should be going through your business. It's so much better to get the advice right before you start, so you don't have to unpick it, which is basically the first 4 months of Isabel working with me. Was you doing that, wasn't it?
It was kind of it was unpicking from not because you didn't know your margins, but as in knowing your margins from the
beginning. When you need to be VAT registered.
That is kind of brings me on to the next
point. Screaming moment.
So kind of knowing your financial milestones in your year. This sounds like a really silly, stupid thing to say, but knowing when your financial year starts and finishes.
Still sometimes it has hard.
But it's so simple, but knowing your financial year is really important.
From my point of view, when people used to talk about their financial year, I was like, January. And it's like, no, your financial year. I was like, January? Surely that's when your year starts. People would be like, no. And then when they say, no, my year to date, my financial year to date, I was like, so January to December. And I couldn't understand why some people would be like, no, mine's in April. And I was like, what?
and everyone's financial year will be different. So again, just knowing when your financial year is, working out your quarters, then working out if you are VAT registered, working out your VAT quarters, knowing when you actually have to pay a VAT bill, knowing when you've got to have everything to your accountant. Keep those receipts. I love it when Holly gives me a bag of receipts. It's really sad, but it's a great day for me.
It makes me feel like I've really accomplished something when you ask me for a load.
And you give me all of them.
I'm like, I've got them all for you.
So I think, knowing your margins, knowing your financial year, as simple as when your financial year starts and finishes and when the quarters are. If you're not VAT registered, you still need to know when your financial year is. You need to know when your tax return is due. All things like that. Know your dates. Sit with your accountant and never be scared to ask your accountant or HMRC anything. Get them to write it down in absolute layman terms, but just knowing when those are actually takes away a lot of that like subconscious worry.
Yeah.
If you just know, and my third top tip is face your finances, the good, the bad, the ugly. Holly and I have a financial meeting every single week. Mm-hmm. We get everything out on the table. That is so important.
Yeah, one tip that we have, which is a really obvious one, and I feel like I'm listening to my parents say this, but we will look at, our turnover for the week or whatever, and we'll just hive off a percentage for our VAT, so that and then we were putting it in a savings account, but we hive off that percentage and we put it directly into our HMRC VAT account. Mm-hmm. So although our last VAT quarter was actually way more than we'd planned for, and we were feeling very smug that we had a lump of money sat in the bank, we still could cover it. Mm-hmm. So it was obviously, if we hadn't have kept that money aside, it would have been quite a scary prospect. Yeah. So it's just and the reason that we do it weekly is, even if you do it at the month, it's still, then that percentage is a bigger hit. Mm-hmm. At least I would like to do it every week and just look and hive off that bit, so it doesn't feel like such an impact to your cash flow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I think if you're having those regular financial chats, you are constantly talking about cash flow, you're constantly talking about what's coming in, what's going out. Yeah. Those little bits in and out is just an easier tackle.
Yeah. There's no sort of horrible invoice waiting around the corner as well. I think it's there in the back of your mind and you can just sort of plan for it. Obviously starting a brand is a really scary investment up front. I've talked about this before, but the first Feel Good production, which was a really tiny amount, I paid for through the money I'd made from Pre-Loved Edit, and the second tranche, again, I'd made money on Pre-Loved Edit, but then the third, we grew like 380% in that first year, which for us to keep up with the demand and not lose those customers I'd worked so hard to retain and keep them interested in the new jumpers that were coming out. I got a government startup loan, some very generous, like, friends and family lent me money, which all of, everything in my whole being was like, oh, I don't feel comfortable doing this, but everything else here is lined up, it's working. I know these jumpers are going to sell. It is a risk, but my gut and actually the figures for the past 9 months or whatever are showing me that this projection is not going to stop. So you have to do it. You have to make that leap. Mm-hmm. But you can always get advice out there, and actually the government startup loan is a really, they assign you a mentor to discuss what's a realistic amount to borrow. The interest rate is very, very, very low. And it was just a good way for me to then make that jump up in my production. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it is scary. It's really scary.
I think that probably leads on to the next points quite nicely. We covered everything we wanted to in that point before I actually move on? Yeah, I think we have.
You have, yeah. I think so.
So the next point then is it about borrowing? Yes. No.
Yes, know how to borrow.
Yeah, know how to borrow. So I think with startups, to keep cash flow positive, there are times that you are going to need big, small, relative to your business, injections of cash. Yeah. We have done a few different ways, and some have been better than others. Yeah. But knowing when and how to borrow, I think, is a really great one. Again, don't be scared to talk to your accountant about this.
Yeah. And actually, I didn't speak to the accountant about the government startup loan, but then they recommended it later on when we were talking about borrowing some money. and you have a 3-year window. I don't think that's changed, because we spoke to them about that. Somebody said something to me about it not that long ago.
Yeah.
There's a 3-year window in your like infancy to apply for it. So it's just Google government startup loan, and that's quite a good one. But it's tricky, because nowhere will take you seriously until you have the like analytics and stats behind you. But how are you meant to get those until you start getting your products out there? So it's a really tricky one to navigate.
I think, and if you are borrowing money, look at exactly what that looks like. So look at the repayment schedule, look at any interest, and how that's going to impact you. I think a really good example of where we've had to borrow money is, until kind of this quarter really, Holly and I actually haven't always spoken about finances on a really regular basis, and there have been times where we've been very open and honest, but we actually now carve out half an hour to an hour every week and have a actual sit down, let's get it all out meeting, where we weren't before, when it was just Holly and I in the office.
We were kind of just talking about it
It was talking about it, but again, it's actually the sitting down element of it. There have been times where it's like, oh my God, this is really big. We haven't planned as well for it as we should have done. And we need to borrow money to cover something which isn't the best type of borrowing. And actually the repayment of that looks a little bit uglier than it had we planned better, which is why I've done know your finances first, have everything planned out, get those weekly or very regular financial meetings in, and you can, if you then need to borrow, you can actually borrow better.
I also think a really good bit of advice, once you've sort of established yourself with your customer a little bit, is doing your product on pre-order. But I would just say to manage your customers' expectations. Yeah. And honestly, if we have something on pre-order, we will scream about it until we're blue in the face on all of our social platforms. We'll have it literally in the product title. It will say pre-order. We will then have it in the description. We will have it everywhere that it's on pre-order. Yet we still get emails where people say, when is this going to arrive? I ordered it a couple of days ago. So you just need to be prepared to manage that part of it. But it is a really good way of sort of essentially having that money up front, and then just not... I completely shit myself when I do a pre-order, that until it's the jumpers are there in my hand, it's quite a stressful way to do it, but it does work.
It does work. Yeah, and that's in a roundabout way, it's kind of a type of borrowing, isn't it? Because you are getting money into your business before you have that product. The product's always on the way. We've never done a really true pre-order where we actually sell something and then give that number to our supplier to make. We've only ever done a pre-order with something that we know sells. We've already ordered it, it's on the way. Yeah. But just get it, we might have needed that injection of cash flow at the time, or we just know sometimes it's a good way for us to plan how many we need to order next. Because we've been like, God, how, this has gone really well this time. How do we know what to do after? And actually a pre-order has been a really good gauge of that.
And that's because that's a very tricky part of our business, is with the jumpers being hand knitted, people love, and we love the fact they're hand knitted, but it obviously takes a long time. So if we sell out, it does mean it's a long wait. So we need to really try and plan for that, but you can't really until you've seen how the jumper sells. Like the feel goods, we know that they will always sell, but the new, like our Zodiac collection, for example, we had no idea. I mean, we were fairly sure they would do well, but we haven't been like, oh, we'll commission some more to be knitted because we think they'll do well. We just sort of wait, but that is the nature of Slow Love Knitwear, isn't it? You just have to wait for it.
So wrapping up the borrowing thing, I also think don't be scared to borrow. I think so many people think if I'm having to borrow, I've failed, and it doesn't work like that. A lot of the time it's like, for me to be able to grow, I need and type of investment, whether that be a startup, a bank loan, Shopify or PayPal, going to your accountant and doing it that way. To be able to push myself onto the next like stage of my business, that borrowing is important, but make sure you just know the ins and outs of that borrowing.
Understand that you are taking on debt.
Yeah.
Which is a really horrible sentence, and one that lots of people are taught not to do. It's obviously, you really need to understand what you are taking on, but it is, for us, it was a necessary thing to do.
Right, which brings us on to number 8, which is risk. Sorry, they're a bit up and down. Risk.
Yeah.
I feel like you are the best person to definitely discuss this one.
With risk, it's a really tricky one, because some people now who come in and will give, advice as to the sort of ins and outs of the strategy of the company will say, I need to take on more risk and have, start having more knitwear commissioned, so it's being held as in stock. Makes me nervous. So in that respect, I probably could do with being a bit more risky. But I think as far as the jumps I made to start the brand were very risky. And I have been through watching my husband deal with a lot of difficult, like risk of business difficulties. And it's put me off from ever putting my family under any kind of risk. But I still did it for this. Which has been one of the scariest things I've done, but at least I had control of what was going on. And I also, it's like my testament to how much I believe in the knitwear. So I left my job to start this when my husband had got a new job, which was, we really could have done with both of our incomes. But I knew that this needed my full-time attention for it to grow, and that was my risk. I think you have to know that if you have any chance of growing, to be able to stomach that risk. I mean, there are some days where there is a lot of financial pressure, and Isabel always says this, but I'll just say, we'll talk about it, and I'll say, I'm not going to lie, this is making me feel a bit stressed, but that's where it is. I just say, I'm feeling a bit stressed.
If I was in that situation, I'd be like, So I think that you have to be a certain type of person to be able to really be able to sit with those risky moments. But I think that from what I've learned and seen with Holly starting the brand, is because she was so confident in all of those initial foundations that she built with the business. So, as the things we discussed at the beginning, the audience, the brand, the product, the confidence was there that the risks aren't then like a total shot in the dark. It's just those big leaps to grow. You can't really grow. You can grow without risk, but it's much slower. It's probably not as exciting. It's with those risks, it really brings home that excitement and kind of charges you to make those jumps and push you forward. So I think growth without risk looks very different and probably not quite as successful as growth with risk.
Yeah. And if any advice, if I had asked anyone around me, not including you guys and not Charlie actually, but anyone else would have been like, don't do it. Don't do not risk anything. Do not put yourself under that pressure. Don't do it this way. And I was like, I just knew it was going to work. So it was a tricky one. And then again, like the Palm Springs photo shoot as an example, that was quite a risk, because it was quite a lot. It was quite a big jump to do it. There were things that we did. It wasn't like we stayed at some amazing hotel. We got an Airbnb, but it was all planned. The Airbnb was very aesthetic. It was a really sort of one of those mid-century, it looked like a film set. But yeah, that was a risk. There have been a lot of risks. Hiring people is a risk.
I think that's the thing. You can't get away from the risk elements when you're growing.
No,
business.
If you want to actually grow in any direction, you have got to. And it's the same with designing with a new product concept. Like this year we have got 2 things coming out which are completely new for us. That's a risk. Yeah. Even the knitwear designs, like we've brought some out which are so completely different to the ones before. We don't know if people are going to love them or hate them.
We have done some element of like there. We've got data to look back on and go, this sold well. Let's try and do that slightly differently. But it is still a risk.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the point is you have to be able to sit with risk and take those risks to be able to grow.
Yeah.
And there are certain types of people, i.e. Holly, that are much better than doing that than I am. But that's why I don't have my very own entrepreneurship business, because for my personality type, that's not something I could probably sit with very easily. But to really grow, you need to, from the top, you need to be able to take those.
And learn from your mistakes.
Yes, some of the risks that we've taken as a business really haven't paid off, but the learnings from those risks they're kind of as important as the ones that do. You have to make mistakes, growth to happen, and but making sure that you actually learn from those mistakes, that's the biggest thing. And it kind of goes back to that same lesson in facing the finances, the good, the bad and the ugly. Face the failures in their ugliest form and learn from those. Is a biggie. And not being scared to go, God, we fucked that. Like, and but that's such an important thing, being able to say that with your team. And I think that's actually, this is a bit of a rogue point, but that kind of does come from the top. Is Holly is never afraid to go, that was my mistake, I did that. That is such an important thing. You'll never go, oh God, that was somebody else's fault, or I listened to that person and I shouldn't have done. It's
that would make me a really shit boss if I did that.
Yeah.
I think that's leadership. You definitely never push your mistakes onto somebody else. I think that is bad form. But there was an example of something that we did early last year where I was a little bit cocky with it, and we definitely commissioned too much without testing the waters, and that was 100% of my mistake. But we've learned from that. Yeah.
But again, those kind of things are, as in the mistakes are almost as important as the wins.
And you've
got to lean into those. You've got to lean into them.
Definitely, 100%. So moving on to the 9th point, the marketing. So marketing, number 9. I mean, that's not a tip. Obviously, you need to have marketing. Unless you're like Hermes, who basically their marketing is just the fact that everyone wants their bag and they have these insane wait lists. You need to do your marketing. So everybody's got a different way of going about social media. Obviously, in this day and age, is a great tool to have, but it isn't something that is just given to you on a silver platter, which I do think maybe certain generations think that it is. And Abby's the one who definitely gets this a lot as a job as our social media manager. I think people think that a viral hit is very easy to get and that it's the be all and end all, and actually it's not. It's definitely consistency. So we started off just doing everything organically. It was just Abby and myself just doing, silly Instagrams that were fun and sort of really just talking constantly about the product, hopefully not in too much of a pushy way, but in a way that people enjoyed and really got the sense that they could kind of feel the product was really important to me. And once we kind of felt that we were nailing how we did the organic side of it, we then did start to look at ads, which definitely then moved us up a level, and we invested a lot of money in doing that. And then newsletters, which we didn't really pay any attention to until, sort of 6 months ago-ish, which is really late for us, really.
But the same kind of, not the same message, but the same thing in all of these types of marketing is consistency. So from day one, it wasn't glossy, it wasn't perfect, but it was consistent. And as the marketing has grown with the growth of the business, it's consistent. So we now have lots of different marketing avenues with lots of different plans in place, but all of them are just consistency is key with your marketing.
Yeah, I mean, we never try and be something we're not. I don't think we never try and be like too cool for school. I am just always like, we want to make sure that the quality, as we don't have a bricks and mortar shop, it's really important for people to get a sense of the weight and the quality. So it's for me, it's always like that is getting that across. Sizing help, but consistency, 100%. 100%.
So number 9, the number 9 top tip is keep your marketing consistent. Number 10,
never stop learning.
Never stop learning. I think,
which we did just sort of touch on, but sort of learning from your mistakes is obviously one, but never stop learning in that we are, we jumped into Slow Love. I jumped into not knowing anything about it. You joined without any kind of background in e-commerce. Abby is self-taught, I am self-taught, and you are self-taught. We are just constantly learning, whether it's accountancy, software training, or podcast producing, or courses about how to do ads, or courses about SEO. And I don't know how to knit, which is like, I don't have the patience, but I have a lot of respect for how it's done. And Grace and I are always going to London to look at new techniques and how things, really getting a good sense of feel of what is the best type of knitwear out there, and have, looking at other pieces that are out there and brands, and just seeing how we sit within that market. So, even with one of the new things we'll be hopefully starting to give teasers for in April, it was interesting to talk to
the subject matter experts.
And just see how that's made. It's again, all of that is learning.
And learning can look, I think you've touched on it there, that learning doesn't have to be buying expensive training packages, or it's listening to podcasts, speaking to Grace. Even Grace is our designer, and she by far and away has the most like professional learned knowledge over everyone else in the business on her particular subject. We ask Grace questions all the time. She answers stuff for us that touch every part of the business. Whenever we're with the accountants, listening to that, asking questions is learning, understanding answers is learning. We are subscribed to the Business of Fashion. Just reading lots about that. Holly's always sending us, we're always actually sending each other throughout the whole team. Have you seen this? That's on the new, Shah, who covers all of our customer service, she's loves politics, and she's constantly like, oh, this is coming in America, which changes postage, the way we post stuff. All of that is types of learning. Even little things like, oh, we really like how that brand photographed this. That is learning. It's just never resting on your laurels and just going, oh, we've had a really good year, let's put our feet up. Never have that attitude. It's just, there's always something to do better, or take something from a different perspective. Never stop learning.
I mean, that's important within every aspect of your life, isn't it? But it is just, I think you've just got to keep learning. And when you meet people that are experienced and actually genuinely want to help you, it's always, don't be afraid to ask people questions.
Never let your ego get in the way of anything that you don't know.
That's a really good one. And don't be afraid to ask silly questions. I
Mm.
think, we have the silliest questions.
Yeah. Yeah, we do. I've got a very one-sided would you rather for you today.
Okay.
Because I don't have my own business, so I can't answer the question. But would you rather sell Slow Love Knitwear way earlier than you ever would want to, but the next business you started it's guaranteed to be successful, or carry on with Slow Love for as long as you want to?
But it carrying on being successful.
Yeah, carry on as if it is today, and carry on, move forward. Or
I would do that.
You'd carry on with Slow Love?
Yeah.
God,
I'd start a side one as well.
A side hustle.
I reckon just like if we carried on growing. I mean, we've talked about a little business idea.
We have.
Yeah, I mean, there's always, we love our niche, but there's definitely, I think, endless possibilities. But yeah, I don't think I feel like I would never be able to capture anything like this, like Slow Love Knitwear.
Good answer.
Thank you.
Good answer. I think that's it.
Yeah.
I hope you find something in those top 10 tips.
Yeah.
Do you wish you had this podcast when you started 3 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, I had the Grace Beverley one, which was my go-to for
Grace
like
Beverley is
dog walks.
Do you know, I actually didn't really start listening to podcasts until I started at Slow Love, and you used to talk a lot about Grace Beverley.
I mean, when I was on my own in the office, I had to have someone to listen to, so I was
Grace was your soundboard.
Yeah. I was like, oh, Grace said this was fine, I could do this. So.
Thanks,
Anyway.
Grace.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks
we
for
hope
listening.
that somebody finds this interesting and helpful. And obviously, if you ever want to DM us a sensible question, please feel like
Or
you
a silly
can,
question.
and we will do our best to answer it. But yeah, thank you.
Goodbye.